Awesome. Okay, well, what it didn't say on the bio is that I'm also a runner. And as you guessed from the topic today, we're going to talk about running, we're going to talk about sprints and marathons, and drumroll, software engineering. And you're probably wondering, how do these things tie together? We're going to have some fun. We're going to go through that over the next 40 minutes or so. Now, quick show of thumbs or drop it in the chat. Thumbs up, I like to run. Thumbs down, I hate running with a passion. Yeah, I always get more thumbs down than thumbs up, and that's okay. Yeah, we get a little neutral. Awesome. Awesome.
I
Whether
like to
you
walk.
walking's good too. Whether you love it or hate it, we're going to have some fun together. Now, we're on camera, but if we were in person, you'd probably call BS on me right now because I'm about 6 inches too short for my weight. I'm not a tall, lanky guy, and I wasn't given what a lot of the gifted runners of the world have. But what I've had to do is get a lot of the little things right in order to compensate for that. So I've never won any races. I probably never will unless I'm still racing when I'm 90. Then maybe I got a chance. And in the course of my running experiences, I've had some runs go really well, and I've had some runs go poorly, very, very poorly. And in the course of all these experiences, especially the train wrecks, I've learned a lot. So in 1999, I ran my first of 16 marathons so far. I don't know if I'll make it till I'm 90. But in the quarter century since then, I've realized a few things. Distance running provides a great forum for quiet time, thinking, and solving the problems of the world. As software engineers, undoubtedly, you've had that night where you've woken up at 3 a.m. and you figured out how to debug this code that you could not figure out. Well, running's the same thing. You let your mind go, you take it away from work, and all of a sudden, the problems just start getting answered. And the longer I've been running, the more ideas I've had, the more things I've learned. And I made 5 connections that I think are pretty cool here because they can make or break a long distance run. So pacing. Pacing is critical if you want to run distance. Managing your metrics. If you want to maintain the pace, you have to know and manage the metrics. You have a lot of competing needs working on you when you're trying to do a distance run. You have to set and manage appropriate expectations, and you have to future-proof yourself for the long haul. Like the saying goes, you can't get to the finish line unless you get to the starting line. Can't get to the starting line if you're sick or injured. And guess what I realized over the course of many runs and a lot of time by myself with nothing better to do? These 5 tools are highly applicable not only to running, but to managing programs and portfolios to lead software teams for the long haul. So for the next 35 minutes or so, we're going to think like carpenters a little bit. You know, you see a carpenter, they have those really cool tool belts, and they've got hammers and pliers and screwdrivers and Phillips heads. Well, we as software leaders, we have tool belts we wear as well. We keep them in our heads. We still have the tool belt. We're going to put 5 tools into that tool belt. And if you've already got them, we're going to try to hone them a little bit to make you a better software leader for the long haul. Pacing, metrics, balance, expectations, and future-proofing. Okay, so let's start off with the world of the technology leader. And I guess I'd start by saying if you are a leader in technology, the first thing you do is get on your hands and knees and thank Almighty God because you are in the coolest job on the planet. If you look at all the greatest developments in the world in the last 10 years and what we will see in the next 10, they're all in the area of high tech. So you're the ones in the arena, you're the ones making a difference, you're the ones changing the world and making it a better, safer place. So for that, up front, I'm going to thank you. Doesn't make our jobs any easier though, does it? In fact, if you look around, which I'm sure you already did, you're probably familiar with some of these terms and some of these things, and you've probably had them said to you in some not so friendly forums before. We used to work for a leader who we dubbed Ship It. We gave him that middle name because no matter what the quality of the product was, all he ever said was, ship it. I had a customer a couple of years ago who said, I want you to be more agile. I said, great, I'd love to. What do you mean by that? She says, I don't know. I just know there's this agile thing and I want it. We had another manager who, I won't call him a leader, I'll call him a manager who one year, he had all his project managers print out, we used to have those things called printers back in the 90s, and we'd print our Microsoft project schedules and we'd hand them in and he'd review them. And with his red pen, and I kid you not, he would cross off any form of review he would cross off all testing. And he said, just make the developers do it right the first time. And of course, my favorite was probably 15 years ago. There was a business executive who stood up in front of the executive team, and I was in the room as well, and said, I've been screaming for this product for 3 years, and IT has yet to write a line of code. Now, the project hadn't been approved to be worked on, but I still took it very personally. And I'm sure some of these things, they hurt, even though you know you're going fast, you're doing the right things, but it's difficult. So as tech leaders, we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And the name of the game here is going to be speed, value, and quality, not just at a project level, but sustained for the long haul. So what do you say we jump in? Let's talk about the tools. Tool number one is pacing. I trained for my first Ironman under the watchful eye of a coach. Like any triathlon, you swim, and then you bike, and then you run. And in this case, the run was a 26.2 mile full marathon. And my coach taught me a lot about pacing, especially when he showed me how to slow down in order to go faster. Makes no sense, right? All year, I'd been training at a heart rate of 153 to 155. How do you know that? Well, if it's important to your success, you better be measuring it and you better be tracking it. So I've been training at 153 to 155. And then the week before the race, he said, all right, VanEpps, race day, 148 is your max. I'm like, whoa, what? He said, 85% equals 148. 85% of my max, not the 153. He said, I do not want your heart rate over 148. I didn't believe him. I wanted to argue with him, but he was the coach. So I kind of listened to what he said. But then come race day, forget it. Adrenaline hit me, started cruising. I'm cranking away at 153, 155. I could hear the voice in the back of my head. Slow down, 148, 148. So I did. Turns out that by the time we got to the end of the race, I still had a ton in the tank and I was actually accelerating and I finished stronger than I ever have before. Fastest time I ever had, all because I slowed down to go faster. Now, I thought that was only a running thing, but not too long ago, Greg McCown wrote an article for Harvard Business Review. And in this article, he supported that 85% mindset. He says, operating at 100% effort all the time will result in burnout and ultimately less optimal results. Now, to avoid burning out and overexertion, which we all know leads to mistakes, rework, subsequently frustration, dissatisfaction, and attrition. So tool number one is pacing. Your goal is to find an ideal pace for the team to sustain. Now, it's not easy. Don't just think you're going to go out and dream up a pace. You got to get some data. We put a velocity chart here on the left for you to look at. Understand the team's velocity, max velocity, and understand that you're going to be adjusting this over time. Now, I would say start with your current max, target 85% of that as a pace, and then see what happens. Monitor it, course correct. Monitor the pace. Are you able to speed up? Are you slowing down? And then subjectively, monitor things like sustainability. Ask your team, one of my favorite questions is, on a 10-gallon fuel tank, how many gallons do you have left in your tank right now? If the team's tired, if they're stressed, if they're burnt out, they're going to tell you, I'm running on fumes. I'm down to my last gallon. If a team comes back and individually and collectively, they're saying, hey, tank's full, man, we can keep going. You're probably doing pretty darn well. You might even try to go up a little, but keep an eye on it. You don't want to push and drive the burnout. Okay. So tool number one, pacing. Tool number two, manage metrics for the long term. A few years ago, I did an ultra marathon that was 12 hours long, and this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but bear with me, where we had to run a 2-mile loop as many times as we could. The winner was the person who ran the most loops in 12 hours. I didn't win, but there were people who did the 24-hour version of the same race. So at 3 in the morning, when we were all enjoying sleep, they were out running 2-mile loops through the dark. Now, here's something we had to manage and measure the metrics for the long haul. So first metric you probably guessed, heart rate, and you probably guessed the number, 148. I knew I had to keep my heart rate under 148. I had to manage my pace, which was a bit challenging because there were hills, there were uphills, there were downhills, there were muddy hills, there were tree stumps, there were riverbeds, there were wet, dewy grass in the morning. So all this stuff that would mess up your pacing, but yet I still had to figure out how do you get an aggregate understanding of my pace, because you go too slow, you miss the cutoff, or you basically get pulled out of the race. You go too fast, you burn out. Had to measure steps per minute, my cadence, making sure my legs were going quickly and at a sustainable rate. Nutrition, you get into a race that's 8, 10, 12 or more hours, critical. Right number of calories. Right number for me was 180. I had to make sure I was getting 180 calories per hour and 23 ounces of water. Lots of metrics. And all I'm saying that is because I had to measure this in order to get through the race. And as software engineering teams, we have similar features. And yes, we're going to hit the riverbeds. We're going to hit the tree stumps. We're going to hit the dewy grass and the wet hills. But those are the things through which we have to manage our metrics. So the tool is identify, track, and manage the metrics. I advocate this balanced scorecard type approach. Now there's some barriers. Rework. Rework kills every single metric. Every time it kills speed, it kills quality, it kills all your metrics. So we're doing a great course right now called Quality Deep Dive. Some of you have taken it before. I'll give a shameless plug for that as a future course if you haven't. Really cool, helps you avoid this evil rework. Another barrier, excessive sprinting and insufficient downtime. I see teams that go from sprint to sprint to sprint to sprint to sprint. And the next thing you know, they're just burning out. So create a balanced scorecard, choose your metrics, establish healthy ranges. You can use subjective and objective measurements. That's okay. It's sometimes the gut feel metrics are just as important as anything else, and course correct. So we broke our metrics in this case into 2 strategies, or aligned them with 2 strategies: speed to value and delight. One of them is under the speed to value. We said, let's watch the speed. Are we managing? Are we continuing to keep it right? And your speed can be velocity, it can be story points, KLOCs, it can function points. You can pick any metric you want. The idea is just be consistent and try to maintain that pace. Quality. One of the first things when your team gets tired, quality will start to show errors, more defect injection, more defect leakage. Value. Are you working on high value projects that the team feels are making a difference? Or is the team working on things that are just boring, monotonous? It makes a difference in their attitude, makes a difference in their energy, makes a difference in speed and quality. And rework, we just talked about. Rework is evil. Enough said. In the delight category, we got 3. Delight your customers, delight your employees, delight your shareholders. Shareholders being your leadership, people who own stock in your company, executives. But how satisfied are the customers? Well, dissatisfied customers is a very quick way to dissatisfy your people and burn them out. How many customer defects are they finding? Kind of tied to quality, but it's when the customer starts making noise and getting down on the team, then it really affects people, and it affects their ability to continue working at a rapid pace with high quality for the long haul. Employees, there's a lot of things you can watch here. Employee SAT scores, hours worked per week, non-project time. It's important people have downtimes. They can do learning, do innovative type work. One team I worked on said every Friday, 12 to 5, we're going to do nothing but innovation. And they just check themselves out from project work and kind of recharge the batteries to go into the weekend. Very cool strategy. His team was super happy. And what's the sentiment? In this case, I marked it red because I've worked places where this has been an actual scorecard. But when people are burnt out, when they're frustrated, when morale is starting to dip, you can see it. It's going to take a toll on speed in the long haul. Okay, so there's your metrics. Next tool, I skipped. There we go. Next tool is my favorite. It's balance. So imagine running a race like I just described. The training takes a lot of time, hours, 10, 15, 20 hours a week. Well, all of a sudden, the more I run, the more my body craves sleep. But the more I crave sleep, the less time I have to run. I needed time for running, but I also needed time for strength training so I didn't get injured, future proofing. And I needed time for things like stretching and yoga to, again, stay healthy so you can get to the starting line, so you can get to the finish line. Oh, yeah. In the course of doing this, my family kind of wanted to see me. My boss expected that I'd still work. I thought I'd get a little hiatus so I could just do nothing but train, but they didn't buy into that. So I had to balance family, work, personal life, training, and everything else life throws at us. This model is what I call a CAS model: clients, associates or employees, and shareholders. Shareholders, again, leaders, executives, people who really just care about revenue and profit. Now, the beauty of this model is you see an outer band of green. Your trick is to use this tool to assess where are they, associates, clients, and shareholders, where have they been? And as you make decisions, understand how it will impact each area. Your goal is to push each one to the points of the triangle and keep them as green as possible. But things happen. Let's suppose we have a project that's running late. You're managing a portfolio. You've got all these teams, all these projects, and you got some of your folks where, let's say, they have to burn the midnight oil and catch up on a project. So you say, we're going to work some overtime. The associates may go into yellow. They might get a little annoyed. If it's the first time it happened, they're probably not going to go red, right? They're not going to be really pissed. I hate my job. I want to quit. But they're going to be a little annoyed. As long as you quickly get them back in a couple of weeks to green, you're probably okay. But let's say it happens again. And then a couple projects later down the portfolio, you do it again and again. Well, now you're going to push them into the yellow and probably into the red. But what you have to look at is, how does that affect not only the employees, but the shareholders and the clients? There's scenarios, I've experienced them, I hope you haven't, but I'm guessing many of you have, where the employees start to get really pissed. And all of a sudden they're tired, they're burned out, and they start making quality mistakes. And then who notices? The client. First couple of quality mistakes, they may be okay. Maybe not, depending on what you do. But more often than not, they're probably okay if they're not catastrophic. Introduce too many defects, and all of a sudden they go from green to yellow to red. Then what they do is they call your leadership and say, I want a service level credit, or I'm not doing business. I want to cancel the contract. I'm not going to renew the contract. All these things. Now your shareholders get really mad because it's hitting their pocketbook, less revenue, or it's impacting profits. So as you make decisions throughout the portfolio on anything, think about the impact on the associates, shareholders, and clients. You could take another course of action here that says, let's flip the project 2 weeks. Maybe it's okay. Maybe the client will stay green. Maybe it's not. Maybe the client cannot go 2 weeks late, and you push them red. Same with shareholders. You might say, well, give me more resources. So you go ask for some resources. They might have some people available, but they might have to get contractors, and they might have to spend some money to do it. It hits the revenue. So as you go through all of your portfolio related decisions, think about the impact on clients, associates, and shareholders. Okay, managing long-term expectations. This is tool number 4. We're going to skip the racing stories for one slide. You okay with that? You're probably thanking me. Like, oh my gosh, enough. All right. So the first day I met my new client, we'll call him Bob. He was ready to fire my company, and he made that very clear. I said, Bob, tell me, what are your concerns? And weigh them. Give me some relativity here. Like, how important are they? He said, well, let's start out. And this is the actual list you're looking at. He said, you guys are slow. He said, not only are you slow, but when you make commitments, you miss. You're always slipping your schedule. You're always late. And when you do finally deliver, your quality sucks. And that's probably enough. I didn't need to hear any more. But then he got into how expensive we were, and we needed some talent upgrades, and we didn't have enough industry expertise, and so forth. So we sat down in the conversation that day, and I said, all right, are you okay if I circle 3 things? We got some things we can do to improve quality, and I think that that's going to help the schedule. So if we improve our commitment process, we improve our quality, I think we can take care of the first 3. He's like, if you do that, you'll be my hero. So I went away. We talked on and off, and he realized we were putting a lot of things in place and a lot of tools and tricks from Quality Deep Dive, which I might have made a shameless plug for already. But we did that, and all of a sudden we're rocking, right? The projects are coming in on time. The projects are coming in with higher quality. And Bob, anecdotally, I know he's happy. So 6 months later is the formal business review. I'm feeling real good about this. We sit down. I said, Bob, how you feeling? And Bob looks at me and he says, you know, we got a mess here. We got to clean this up. I'm like, oh no, how can you even say that? And he said, you know, I really don't think there's enough thought leadership coming to us. I don't think that, you know, we're getting the maximum reduction in cost from leveraging offshore. He says, I'd like you to put more business offshore and then pass some of the savings on to me. And I think, you know, we could probably still make a couple people swaps and get some better people in here. And I'd like better visibility into some of the status reports. And I was crushed. I was like, there's still 10 things wrong, even though we solved everything. Now, as a side story, Bob has since retired. And somebody ran into Bob about 3-4 weeks ago and asked how he's doing. And you know what he said? I hate my garden. I hate my boat. I hate my wife. I hate retirement. And I hate everything else. So Bob always has a list of things that are wrong. But I'm kind of digressing here. So I went back and I shared the Pareto with Bob. And I said, Bob, you remember this? He says, I remember this clearly. I said, look at this, slow, late, and quality. Would you agree we've solved these? He's like, oh, well, yeah, that's a thing of the past. That's done. He says, that's not a problem. He says, you guys are way past that. And it hit me, Bob has 10 things wrong. Most customers have 10 things wrong. Most of your employees have 10 things wrong, and that's never going to change. The key is understanding the gravity of each. 10 things wrong being, I want you to give me more thought leadership and pass more cost savings on through offshoring, to me, is a very different weight from you're slow, you're late, and your quality sucks. So what I learned from that is don't measure based on the number, measure based on the severity. And about 2 weeks later, in the hallway, Bob and I were talking. He had just spent a one-on-one with Ed, his second line manager, who said, how are you doing with this horrible underperforming vendor? He said, I looked at him and I told him, I now wave their company flag in my office. He became our biggest fan. So the tool for your tool belt is manage the long-term expectations. There's barriers, short-term memory, and you've probably seen this. You fix a problem, your customer's happy or your employee is happy, and then 3 months later, they forget that it even happened. So another barrier is perceptions. This was on me. My perception was 10 things wrong equals 10 things wrong. Not true. And not having good data. Thank goodness we had good data where we could pull this old folded up piece of paper that had all of his Pareto chart handwritten and said, do you remember this? And we had the data. So your actions, you got to track these things. You got to track the key issues with your employees, with your customers, in a notepad, in a spreadsheet, in a PowerPoint, on a bar napkin, whatever it is, just track the issues. Document what you're doing. You're going to make both continuous improvement, which is kind of like your everyday, make things a little bit better, and your discontinuous or your step function improvement, like we did when we overhauled the quality program. Document those, track them, measure your progress. Remember what I said earlier about that 153 to 155 heart rate? If it's going to be a critical success factor, make sure you measure, track, and review. And that's the last action here is review periodically. I sat down with Bob every 3 months after that, and we reviewed just to make sure he didn't lose sight of what we were doing, despite the signals on a daily and weekly basis that he felt like things were moving in the right direction. Okay, last tool, number 5, but certainly not least, future-proof the organization. Now, in 2016, our triathlon team, we had all signed up for the same race. We were going to go to Louisville. We were going to do the Ironman there together. All 10 people on the coaches team signed up to do it together. This was epic. This was his moment. He'd been coaching. He'd never had a team of 10 people. He now had a team of 10 people. This was his 10th Ironman, so it was kind of a celebratory event for him. But he didn't manage the organizational risks. Now, he'd been pushing people probably a little too hard because he really wanted to make sure we did well and represented him properly. Kind of backfired. I ended up tearing a rotator cuff. We had a couple women who couldn't run quite as fast as the rest of the group. And his solution was to publicly body shame them and to tell everybody to make sure that we all put the pressure on the girls not to eat so that they would lose weight and would run faster. There's a motivational tactic you should never, ever, ever try. They both quit pretty much on the spot. And all of a sudden, one by one, these behaviors continued and everybody dropped out. So what should have been his great moment of coaching, a great way to advertise the world and grow your business, he lost his business. That was the end of his coaching because he had not managed the organizational risks. So the tool here is managing portfolio level and organizational level risks. We all know projects, right? You have project risks. There are things that will cause your schedule to go late. You manage what's the probability of it happening? What's the impact if it happens? What do you escalate? What do you manage? But here you're looking at a different level. And most of what I found is tied to people. So I'm going to take your eyes and focus you on the left side of this. There's two charts we use in the tool that I'm going to call Roundtable, where we do what we call a talent roundtable. There's a lot of different versions of it, but it's all about focusing on future-proofing the organization. The top chart, two dimensions. The y-axis is the impact. What's the impact if this person leaves? The x-axis is flight risk. Is there a low probability this person leaves, medium, or high? So, as you can guess, you start in the top right corner in this one, which we put Dan in there, poor Dan. Very high flight risk, high impact. High impact is sometimes your single points of failure or somebody who's just so good at what they do that it would be really, really painful. It's going to be hard to do this. You have to be very objective because we like to say, well, everybody's super important. You can lose people. It hurts, but you can lose people. But there's people where it really hurts. This is what you're managing for. So you're really looking at the top right half of this slide, or this diagram, rather. So if somebody's, I even left them blank by design. If somebody's a low flight risk and a low impact, if they leave, don't spend your time talking about what to do. Talk about what to do about the people who are high or medium flight risks and high medium impact. So if someone's a flight risk, what do? I guess the first question is why? If it's because of money, maybe you can give them money. Money doesn't solve everything. Money will keep people around for a few months, maybe 6 months, but if there's another root cause of why they're a flight risk, it'll come back and they'll leave. So maybe it's money, maybe it's not. Maybe it has something to do with the working conditions. Maybe they're not challenged. Maybe they're not feeling like they're working on something that's materially important. Do what you can, structure the job, change the job, get them into a mentorship, get them training, find different ways where you can maybe pull them into different types of meetings or help them grow through, like if they're a non-finance person, maybe you pull them into a couple finance meetings so they can get a better understanding of how the business runs, or bring them into some sales meetings so they can understand what the sales team is doing. Try to find things that will address the reason why they're a flight risk. Impact is different, but similar. How do we mitigate the impact? If they're a single point of failure, cross-train. I think my answer on impact is usually cross-train, 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 cross-train. Get more people who can do it. Don't be dependent on one person. Obviously, you still have your superstars in life. You're never going to mitigate that. All you can do is try to make sure that what they know is not so unique to them that nobody else can step in if they leave. The bottom chart, we do something very similar. This is a typical 9-box. 2 dimensions, performance on the x-axis, low performer, medium performer, high performer. And then you have the potential, which is low potential, medium, high. High potential is somebody who could take on more and more responsibility. You can see them kind of taking on the next level, and then maybe the next level and the next level. Like, you know that there's no ceiling for this person. Person at the bottom of low potential, you know, I've seen this a few people. Alan knows this guy, George. George loved what he did. George was good at what he did. If you ever asked George to do anything above what he did, he'd walk out of the company and say no. But he was really, really, really good at what he did. High performer, low potential. So the key is here to look at these dimensions and say, how do we reward people? Usually pay for performance is a pretty good approach, but the high performers you want to give, again, give them the extracurricular assignment, give them something to research that's unique, give them something to work on that's meaningful, maybe help them grow, put them in a mentorship relationship with a high-powered person. Same with potential. In fact, in potential, things like company stock, long-term payment incentives, other things like this is where it's really good. If somebody has really high potential, you give them a mentorship assignment with somebody that's maybe 2 layers up in the food chain, and then they start to get their exposure and their image branded across executive ranks. It helps them in their career, helps them grow, helps them see new opportunities, but they also know it. They know that they're being watched and groomed for the future. So that's how you get some of the people with high potential to stay. Will they all stay? No. You do what you can. You do your best to minimize, but here's 4 dimensions you can use in this tool we called Talent Roundtable. Okay, so we covered 5 tools. There's a guy on the left. That's me. You can see I'm not running. I'm walking. This is a horrible race. It was in Lake Placid. And that girl standing next to me was my daughter, who was spectating. And she came off the course, or she came out of the stands, got out of the course and was like, Dad, move, move, move. You got to run. You can't walk. I was toast. we have a word called bonking. Bonking is when you're done, you're toast. You'd rather just collapse and die on the course than continue. I was bonked. So she came out and said, Dad, you got to get going. Well, did I pace myself right? No. Did I manage my metrics? Not at all. In fact, what happened that day, it was a very hot day. Then it poured rain for several hours. Then the wind stopped and the sun came back out and it got even hotter and more humid. Now, the enemy was really that my brother-in-law was racing on the same day with me. With me can be interpreted as against me. So I had to not only show off for my family, but I couldn't let my younger brother-in-law beat me. So I said, forget all this stuff. I'm going all out. I'm going to crush it. I have to have my best race ever. And guess what happened? I was that guy. Okay. I didn't balance my needs. I didn't do anything right. Now, I'm going to compare and contrast. On the right, you see a smiling face on me. This is after the Tulsa Marathon I ran with my other daughter. And we actually talked about the race a lot ahead of time. We knew what pace we were going to run. We knew what pace we'd run the flats. We knew what pace we'd run uphill. We knew what pace we'd run downhill. We knew what pace we'd run when we got past mile 18 and we knew our legs started to feel a fatigue. Manage the metrics. You can see the watch on my left arm over 15 layers of coats. I was watching my heart rate, my cadence. We were watching our fluid intake. And I shouldn't say this out loud, but we even stopped and added to the fluid intake when some spectators had Jello shots on the tables around mile 18. That was fun. Never did that before. But we also managed the expectations that our goal is to finish this thing together, and we're going to do it together. We're not running against each other. Probably a good thing because she might have beat me. But we decided we just run it together, and we decided we're going to have fun and we're going to smile. And you know what? We did. We future-proofed. We both had injuries throughout the training season. We managed them very effectively. Physical therapy, strength training, stretching. We followed these things and we got there. And you know what? That's the same thing that will happen to you in your organization. If you use these 5 tools, put them in your toolkit, I think you're going to find that managing your team and your organization for the long haul is going to be much more effective. All right. So I hope you got something out of this. I hope you enjoyed the tools. I hope you found some things you can take away, maybe even steal or copy some of the tools I shared and reuse them, obviously tweak them. If you ever have questions and want something, I'm happy to work with you. But I think it's really cool that there's a lot of tools and every one of us has things that we can share that will help all of us be better engineers and better leaders. Now you're probably reading ahead. This is my favorite quote, and this one's a tribute to you as the technology leaders of the world that I want to read. But then I want to tell you why it's so important to us. Theodore Roosevelt, this is actually called The Man in the Arena, or this was the part of his overall speech that he gave. He said, it's not the critic who counts, or the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, and who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails with daring greatly, so his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So my closing is thank you. Thank you for being in this arena with me, for striving to do the deeds, for being marred with sweat and blood, as I know every technology is at times. We know the great enthusiasms and the great devotions, and we're spending ourselves in the pursuit of the triumph of high achievement, the betterment of the software engineering industry, and making this world a better, safer place through technology.